Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, we're at a hearing for an incredibly partisan piece of legislation. Just after last week, where all of us witnessed the most partisan, angry, bitter, divisive State of the Union speech in the history of our country. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised that Democrats once again seek to divide us. Contrary to the prevailing Democrat narrative happily repeated by the corporate media, that Republican-sponsored legislation would herald a return to Jim Crow. I would note, by the way, Jim Crow laws were drafted by Democrats to ensure the voters could only elect Democrats. That's what Jim Crow was designed to do. The reality is a majority of Americans support legislation that protects election integrity, that protects the right to vote. And yet, today, Democrats are not interested in election integrity. They are interested in power. Power by any means necessary. And so the Democrats' focus is on controlling elections and controlling the outcome. There's an irony. Today, Democrats love to beat their chest and say they are defending democracy. And yet, all across the country, we see Democrat courts and Democrat officials who have been trying to throw Donald Trump off the ballot. Because nothing protects democracy like preventing the voters from voting for your opponent. When the Colorado Supreme Court decision came down stripping the voters of Colorado of the right to vote for President Trump, I said that day the decision would be reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court, and I said it would likely be reversed unanimously. It was reversed unanimously. I invite anyone in this room to point to even one prominent Democrat who criticized that baldly anti-democratic power grab. And not only Colorado, but Maine and Illinois stood up and said, we hate democracy and we will not let the voters vote for our opponent. In the Supreme Court, I led a brief on behalf of 179 members of Congress arguing that Colorado's actions striking President Trump's name from the ballot were unconstitutional and that they endangered democracy. You know who didn't join that brief? Even a single Democrat. Because when it comes to democracy, today's Washington Democrats have zero interest in the voters actually deciding. What they're interested in is anything that maintains Democrat power. And what they oppose is anything that creates even a tiny window that the voters might choose to vote for somebody else. Today, Democrats are pushing a bill that has many terrible provisions. But let's cut to the heart of it. This bill would institute two types of pre-clearance. Pre-clearance for everyone Democrats don't like, and pre-clearance for everything they don't like. This is about power. This is not about election integrity. This is the opposite of election integrity. Here's how it would work. Every state and local government across the country would have to submit certain voter changes. Things like voter ID requirements or prohibitions on ballot harvesting to radical partisan activists at the Biden Department of Justice like Kristen Clark, who has not been shy about her hatred of voter integrity laws. And by the way, spoiler alert, the Biden Justice Department would refuse to pre-clear all of them. Anything enhancing election integrity, the Biden Department of Justice is opposed to. Similarly, state and local governments that the Democrats don't like would have to submit any voting changes to the Biden Department of Justice, which sadly has been the most partisan and political Department of Justice in our nation's history. Mr. von Spakovsky, welcome back to the committee. Although Democrats are holding this hearing under the guise of caring about voting rights, it's ironic because they're the party that just attempted to disenfranchise millions of Americans. I want to talk to you about that irony. Mr. von Spakovsky, How many Colorado voters would have been disenfranchised if the Democrat Supreme Court had affirmed, if the U.S. Supreme Court had affirmed the Democrat Colorado Supreme Court?
4.5 million registered voters.
Does disenfranchising 4.5 million voters, is that enhancing democracy?
No.
Are you aware of any major Democrats who spoke out in support of democracy and against disenfranchising millions of people in Colorado?
I am not.
Are you aware of any major Democrats who spoke out against disenfranchising voters in the state of Maine?
I am not, and that would have been 1 million registered voters.
Are you aware of any major Democrats who spoke out against disenfranchising voters in the state of Illinois, which is the home state of the chairman of this committee?
I am not.
And that was one lone district judge who said, nope, the people of Illinois don't get to vote for the Republican nominee for president. Mr. Van Spakovsky, you wrote a November 2023 report with two important findings utilizing 2016 and 2020 Census Bureau data. What were your conclusions regarding the 9 formerly covered states under Section 5?
That they had registration rates and turnout rates close to the national registration turnout rate or above it. And in fact,
and how did they compare to New York and California?
Yeah, well, they all did better than New York and California, including the turnout of registration turnout, not just of all voters, but registration turnout of black voters.
Thank you.